Today I'm going to be talking to you about a Creepshow story that is so rare, so unheard of, that a lot of people seem to not know even exists in the first place, that I thought was worth talking about. Now, this was a story that was going to be adapted within a potentially cult classic movie. Because for those of you who don't know, Creepshow, the very famous anthology horror franchise, has obviously Creepshow 1 and Creepshow 2, which are extremely loved, and then has an absolute doo-doo atrocity, a war crime to humanity called Creepshow 3. Now, Creepshow 3 is called Creepshow, but it was basically a giant middle finger to the IP. They basically just made a whatever movie. It was horrible, it had horrible stories, and it didn't even feel like Creepshow to begin with. So what ended up happening was they made a movie called Tales From The Darkside, which although it was called Tales From The Darkside, it was completely different to the Tales From The Darkside TV show. This movie felt like what Creepshow 3 should have been, because it was adapting a Stephen King story, it had adapted an Arthur Conan Doyle story, it was an anthology horror format, and it just felt like Creepshow. It embodied what Creepshow is, it fit the style of it, so this was essentially a spiritual successor, the real Creepshow 3 that they just had to do as Tales From The Darkside to avoid any legal problem. There was then supposed to be a Tales From The Darkside 2 movie that essentially would have been like a Creepshow 4 equivalent. It was going to be adapting one Stephen King story, one Robert Bloch story, and then there was going to be a unique story exclusive to the movie that was going to be in there as well. So today I'm going to be talking about that very rare movie exclusive story that actually got adapted into a Creepshow comic, and that story is called Pinfall.
Nice car.
If I'm sniffling throughout this video or I do feel a little bit off in terms of my energy, just know that I am very sick. I'm trying to recover, but I wanted to make some content out there for you guys because I actually got recommended to cover the Tales From The Darkside 2 unmade movie stories by a YouTuber, a fellow friend of mine called Horror FFA. So that's horror, just like Horrorlander, but Horror FFA. So go check out his YouTube channel. He covers a lot of different horror comics, horror movies, horror stories. You guys will love his content. And if you like kids horror, he actually has a bigger channel, his main channel, called Goosebumps Completionist, who you'd recognize as the fellow host of the Goose Junkies podcast that I'm a part of. He's a great guy. Go check out his work. And he also gave me help on these thumbnails as well. So just a great fucking guy, man. Great fucking guy. So Pinfall opens up with basically getting introduced to the idea of bowling leagues. That's right. You get introduced to a local bowling alley and you see that it's team night. There's a bunch of different bowling league teams that are practicing, that are trying to have some fun, trying to get ready for upcoming competitions. And the main group you get introduced to is a bunch of highbrow guys called the Regiment. The leader of Regiment are called a Reggie, and he's a dude who's basically full of himself. He thinks he's everything in a bag of chips, all right? This guy blows smoke up his own ass, and he's out here basically with a bunch of yes men that are the four other bowlers on the Regiment team. And they're pretty comically like yes men because every time that he hits up like a strike or does like a good play, they basically are just clapping in the background like it's a Steve Harvey show. They're just going, outstanding, good job, oh, well done, amazing, spectacular. That type of thing. And you see that they're very competitive. They think that they're the best team, and they actually are the best team at the moment. They're number one in the league. However, Reggie and the team end up getting frustrated because there's this old man, this single old bowler called McDougal, who's basically here every single night to bowl. It's what he loves to do. He loves bowling. However, it is team night, and these group of Silicon Valley, blue collar, Magnum mustache type of guys are basically thinking that he's messing up the flow, that he's ruining their concentration and he shouldn't be there on team night. So they basically end up giving him a hard time. You see that the old dude is very frail. He's trying to bowl, but you can see that his body's sort of suffering. But that doesn't cause them to let up their antics, their insults, and basically acting like that they're better than he is and that he shouldn't be here. It ends up to the point that Reggie actually confronts McDougal and basically tries to get him out of the bowling alley. But then you see that there's an opposing team, another team of bowlers that are right across in the other lane from them. And these guys look like a bunch of goons, all right? They look like they're well established. They look like just some guys having a good old time, drinking beers, slapping high fives, basically just having the time of their lives. And they actually end up standing up for McDougal. They actually go up, approach Reggie. They say, yo, man, McDougal paid the fee. He's allowed to be here right along with us. And because Reggie's basically trying to fire back and try to act like he's the bigger dude, the main guy who's leading this team actually ends up inviting the old man, McDougal, to come and play for them, and even gives them a jersey. You find out that the team is called the Bad News Boars, and they're very rebellious, but you can tell that they got good hearts. They stood up for McDougal. They're sort of the protagonist in this case. And you see that now McDougal is able to play without them having to worry about Reggie and his team basically interfering. So you then see the Bad News Boars playing with McDougal. They're very good. They're hitting strikes. They're the second-rated team. They're basically up there, kind of rivaling the Reggie men. They're very comical. I think the main guy is like super brolic. He's kind of like, built very strong. And he's even got this short, stubby guy who's a yes man that every time he says something, the guy just responds with definitely, like it's an Italian mob. And then McDougal ends up going up to bowl. And you saw that a couple moments earlier, he started having a seizure, that his body was sort of giving out, but it doesn't deter him from trying to bowl. But unfortunately, when he goes up and tries to knock down all the pins, he ends up getting a 7-10 split, which he's never been able to hit before. So he tries to accomplish it tonight. But when he ends up going to try to hit the 7-10 split, he ends up still holding on to the ball. And you see that he ends up sliding across the bowling lane, hits into the pins, and basically the machine, like pin filter, crushes on him. And when the maintenance man goes up to McDougal, he sees that McDougal is basically dropped dead. He's died on the spot. And then there's a big revelation. You find out that McDougal is actually the 10th richest man in the entire world. Yeah, he's got a $3 billion estate, very wealthy, very rich. And that's when the Reggie men right away are basically acting very just sort of uptight. They're acting like bitches. They're like, oh, if we knew he was the richest dude, we would have been a lot nicer to him. Shit. And then you find out that essentially McDougal has signed basically a kind of will or a kind of prize for the bowling league, that whoever ends up winning this championship, this league, and ends up having the most points out of the season will end up getting a $5 million prize, or even more than that possibly. So that means that in case of whoever team wins, each person could end up getting basically $1 million after taxes. So now you got this giant bowling league prize. Everybody's super hyped up. Everybody's training very hard. The Reggie men kick it into overtime, but they believe that they're good enough that they don't have to worry about anybody, except maybe the Bad News Boars. And what ends up happening one night that they're in the bowling alley is that there's a giant crowd. Everybody hears about this McDougal guy dying, this prize being on the line. So it's very crowded. There's reporters everywhere. There's fans everywhere on team night. And the Reggie men end up performing very bad. Reggie himself ends up basically throwing gutter balls. He ends up feeling the pressure, and he ends up costing the team a lot of points. And then you see the Bad News Boars, on the other hand, are having an amazing night. They're scoring strikes, they're getting up a lot of points, and next thing you know, it seems like they're about to hit first place and basically replace the Reggie men. And after they have this amazing night, they get a lot of fan traction, and they're basically on their way to getting that $5 million prize. The Reggie men end up hatching a plan to potentially sabotage the Bad News Boars, in which they might actually tamper with the Dodge van that the team rides in. And next thing you know, as the Bad News Boars are basically riding out on the road, their car basically starts separating from the wheels. It starts going completely wild. And next thing you know, it explodes in a giant ball of flames as it goes down the valley ditch. And the Reggie men are watching from the distance, and they basically chalk it up to these guys dying because of the luck of the draw. They basically try to act like they're not the ones who directly killed them, that, oh yeah, this is just bad luck. We just loosened up a few bolts, and that's what caused this team to basically go off and explode their vehicle. So they are responsible for killing this team because they felt the pressure of them getting surpassed. Next thing you know, there's giant reports made on this. They talk about the bad news boars dying. And next thing you know, the next time that there's the bowling league team night, everybody's watching the regiment and they end up performing very well. They no longer have any big competition and they try to act like dicks. They act like douchebags. They're wearing like black bands to basically act like, oh, I can't believe you guys aren't mourning the death of the bad news boars. This is a very unfortunate circumstance. I can't believe you guys. And we know that they're responsible for killing them. So they're pieces of shit. That goes without question. But what ends up happening is that after they finish up their team night and they're in the locker rooms, weird things start happening. Because now all the employees have left, these guys are just wrapping up before they leave. The lights start going off and there's giant metal rattling noises. And it seems like something really, really off is going on. Somebody might be tampering with the bowling alley. And next thing you know, one of the regiment ends up basically getting grabbed by his throat with this decomposing, dark, crunchy, very stinky hand. And he's like, what the hell is going on? And next thing you know, because they're in the pitch black, the other regiment don't know that one of their guys is being strangled to death. And soon after that, everybody starts dying in a horrific fashion. All right, one of the regiment basically ends up getting thrown into an arcade machine, and coincidentally, it is a pinfall machine, a bowling machine. So you end up getting that animated strike sign, and he ends up getting electrocuted and ends up getting burnt to death. I think his eyeballs start like melting off. Next thing you know, another guy ends up getting grabbed and thrown into the hot dog rotisserie and ends up getting his face melted off. And all of a sudden you realize that these guys, the regiment, are being targeted by some unknown threats. And there are some very brutal, over-the-top kills going on. And then you realize what forces might be at hand. And let's just say that there might be some entities within the story that manage to get some revenge. And I'm going to leave it at that because you can probably figure out what I'm talking about. And the very ending to the story is over-the-top, gory, disturbing, but also really, really fun. That is essentially the very rare story, Pinfall. Overall, I would say that this is a fun story. One of the biggest things I like about this story is the fact that it's a bowling setting. You don't often see that within horror stories, so that being the setting is very unique, makes it very memorable. And it is cheesy, it is sort of on the nose and over the top, but it's meant to be fun, it's meant to be animated, it's meant to be in that sort of regard. So I think that this is a more fun Creepshow story out there. Now, is it the best thing that I've ever read? No, but it's good. I think you guys would enjoy it, and especially when you get to the climax and you see some of these brutal deaths. They are very fun. The fact that people are getting thrown into arcade machines and electrocuted, the fact that dudes are getting thrown into hot dog rotisseries and basically getting their faces melted off. Very over the top, very crazy. You find out what the threat is and it makes sense. It is quite predictable, but nonetheless, it is a fun time to be had. And again, the ending is so fucking wild that when you see it, you're like, damn, man, you wish that this movie would have been made, because I feel like this segment would have been a lot of fun, and it definitely would have been a standout one, no doubt. And that is Pinfall. Overall, I'd give this story probably an 8 out of 10. It is a good story. I definitely recommend that you guys go check it out if you manage to get your hands on the comic. It is very rare. I have to give a shout out to Jude DeLuca. I believe his dad was the one who owned the comic, and he did manage to share some pictures of it with us, so we were able to read a little bit of the comic a while back ago. And there is the unmade script of Pinfall out there that you can find as a PDF. So that script basically you could read as well. And that's what I read for this review. And as well as I've been flashing some of the pages from the comics from what I do have from what Jude DeLuca shared with us. That's all I got for today. If you guys enjoyed, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. That's all I got for today. Deuces.
Arrivederci.